Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I had the pleasure of studying with many great teachers at the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies, and many of them had the privilege of studying with Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And a couple of them told me a story about him. He was a philosophy professor at the seminary, and he was also very involved in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And one day, the students came into class, and he looked at them, and he flipped over a chair. And he said, "What are you doing in here? You're going to be rabbis? What are you doing in a classroom? Get out. Go do something. The world is on fire. Make it better." And he stormed out of the classroom that day. I wonder what he would have to say to us about Ferguson. Perhaps he would tell us about Tikkun Olam. Now, Tikkun Olam has come to mean doing good things for the world, making it a better place. But it was originated by Isaac Luria in Sfat. It's one of the mystical tellings of how creation came to be. And here is the story. When God was creating the world, he made 10 vessels. And God filled those vessels with light, and it was such an overflowing, brilliant light that the vessels shattered. And many sparks rained down on earth. And our responsibility as human beings is to collect these fallen sparks and offer them back up to their origin so that in the world to come, things will be whole. So perhaps Heschel would say, what sparks can you pick up? It's all a matter of free will, right? Whether we choose to pick up the sparks or not. And this week's Parsha is used as a proof text by many a commentator to say that human beings have free will. It starts out, "See, today before you I set a blessing and a curse." Sforno is one of the classical ways of looking at free will. He says, you can choose the blessing or you can choose the curse. There is no middle road. You have free will. Make sure you choose the right one. For me, it has a little bit too much fire and brimstone. I think there can be more nuance. So let's take a closer read of the Hebrew. Yonatan ben Uziel was a translator of the Torah. I know this may surprise you, but there was a time in Jewish history when most people couldn't understand the Torah in its original Hebrew. And so his job was to translate it into Aramaic, which is another Semitic language, because that was the language of the people. That's what most people understood. And when he translated the word curse, he translated it as chalufa, which means something that's been changed from what it was, a transmutation. You see, all translation is also Torah commentary, because when a word can have multiple meanings, the choice that the translator uses to convey meaning to the reader gives nuance to the word. And by saying chalufa, something that's been transformed, what he's saying is that nothing is purely a curse. There's a spark of good in everything. And if we look a little closer at the reading, it starts with the word, "See, this day I have set before you a blessing and a curse." Why do we need this word, see? What are we supposed to be seeing? It could have started, "Today I set before you a blessing and a curse." The Lubavitcher Rebbe says, you're supposed to see that transmutation. You're supposed to see in a curse that which once was good for the purpose of bringing it back to light, finding that spark from the shattered vessel. This is all very well and good, but Ferguson has its sparks over there, right? And we have our sparks over here. Well, let's take a closer look at what's been happening in Dallas. When I Googled police brutality and race relations Dallas, here are a few things that came up. April 11th, 2014, from all newspapers, RT, which means Russia Today. They reported, Dallas police officers, including the union that represents them, are asking citizens organized to keep watch over cops with recording devices to stop filming law enforcement because it is causing unspecified, quote, major safety issues, unquote. August 11th, 2014, days after Michael Brown was shot in Ferguson, Officer Antonio Hudson shot and killed a black man who was unarmed, named Andrew Scott Gaynor. Although, to fully disclose, Mr. Gaynor was charging the police officer at the time. So it looks like there are plenty of sparks to collect in Dallas. But how do we do that? I want to share a topic with you called restorative justice. And to frame what restorative justice is, I'll start with a Jewish concept, tshuva, specifically Rambam's 4 stages of tshuva. He says, first you have to recognize that your behavior is unacceptable and discontinue it. Then you must state what you have done aloud. You must verbalize it to bring it into reality. Next, you have to reflect on how your actions may have pained the other person. And finally, you have to determine that you will not take that action again. At the heart of this system of tshuva is a perpetrator of a crime or a sin taking responsibility for what they've done. And that is also at the heart of restorative justice. Restorative justice is not so much interested in which laws have been broken. It's interested in the relationship between the victim of the crime, the community, and the perpetrator of the crime. So the Witness Justice webpage, it shows the difference between a conventional system of justice and a restorative system of justice through some questions. In a conventional system of justice, the questions are, what law was broken? Who broke the law? And how shall the lawbreaker be punished? But in restorative justice, the questions become, who has been harmed? How can these harms be addressed and repaired? And who should address or repair the harms? An example of a restorative justice approach would be, a young man robbed a store. And he and the owner of the store they sit down in a mediated conversation. And the owner of the store lets him know how the crime affected him and his family. And then he can ask for what he needs. And he might say anything from, I need you to pay me back for the goods you fenced, to I need you to serve jail time, to I need you to come work for me so that you don't have to steal things, to I need you to promise to finish high school because I don't want you to continue this cycle of violence. Whatever justice would look like for the victim, they sit down and have a conversation with each other. So perhaps in the case of Ferguson, it would be a mediated conversation between the citizens of Ferguson and the police force, where the citizens would have an opportunity to say, we don't trust the very people who are assigned to protect us, and here is what we need for trust to be restored. There are many, many sparks to lift back up to their origin. And if today's sermon inspires in someone who's been feeling tranquil about race relations in the United States the urge to write a check to the ADL or a similar organization to organize a peaceful protest here, perhaps to get involved in community organizing or some of the nonprofits that run restorative justice programs, then we as a community will have lifted a spark back up to the Holy One. I was playing with my children this week. It was late afternoon, and we were out on our front lawn in our bathing suits, and I was spraying water. And it looked like we were standing in deep shade under the tree in our front yard. But as the beads of water moved through the air, it actually revealed that even in the deepest shadow, there were beams of light falling down to the ground that could only be revealed when we put water into the air. So my question to you as a congregation is, in this analogy, what is our water? How are we going to look in the deepest shadow and reveal some of the sparks? It's not to answer today in this room, but I would like you to think about it. You can approach me with ideas about social action, whether they're about race relations or something else that's been bothering you. You can also approach Ruben Granado. Can you give a wave? Ruben is a relatively new member and a board member in charge of social action. So my blessing for all of us is that we find a spark to offer back up to make the world whole. Shabbat Shalom.